Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and today we're going to be talking about whether you can tell the difference between whether somebody has everything selected in a slicer or they have nothing selected in a slicer. Okay, and this came out of this was the trailing 6 months thing that I did. It was a question I got on LinkedIn in a private message, and I did a video on it a little bit ago, and basically showed how you can use a disconnected table, like month years over here, and then you can do a measure like the following, right? And in order to show the last 6 months, basically, you're forming the relationship between the two tables in the measure, right? And the other way to do this would be to kind of do the same thing in a filter measure, where you filter out just to the dates that should be in the column chart. Maybe I'll do a video later on about that alternative. But the key part about this was that this count rows month years equals count rows all month years, right? To tell whether or not everything is selected or nothing is selected. Like if there's a default of nothing selected in the slicer, you want it to default to today, right? So, but then I got to thinking about it and like, well, is there a way to tell the difference between whether everything is selected in the slicer and nothing is selected in the slicer? And so I thought I came up with it's not genius, but a mildly clever way of doing it. And turns out that I did, except that there seems to be a bug. And I'm willing to be told this is not a bug, but I'm going to make my case for why there's a bug. Um, so the way I did, so what I came up with was to do the following, right? Month years, right? I originally just copied the dates table, but this time I went out and selected my 4 columns that I needed, right? Then I filtered it to 2011, just that year, and you'll see why in a minute. And then I just union that to like a garbage row, right? I just used all blanks, right? But you could put whatever you want in this row, really, if you wanted to, as long as it matched, the data types and you didn't get into an issue there. But just put a garbage row in, right? And so now you can see down here I have 366 rows because that makes sense because 2011 is not a leap year, so it's 365 days. Add a row, it's 366, right? Easy. So, right. So now okay, so here's got nothing selected. Now, what I did it was, I created this measure, none or all. And right now it's just returning num rows, so it's just the count, right? But there's the logic, right? You do the count rows, do the count rows of all. If the num rows equals the num rows all, basically, and that's it's an error right there, but it doesn't matter because none of this is actually executing. But this should be this, right? In terms of, right? If num rows equals num rows all num all rows, then I was just gonna you return something, right? If num rows equals num all rows minus one, you could return something else. Otherwise, you do whatever, right? So you account for your boundary cases. Okay, so and the issue is, okay, so let's take a look how this works. I'm just returning the count of the rows in the table without the all, right? I'm returning this right here. That is what is in my return statement, okay? So here we go. Nothing selected, 366, hooray, that's what we would expect, right? If we select the individual month, right? February, hooray, 28 days in February. Now let's select all. 366, I'm like, son of a bitch, right? This should work. And I got to testing some things and everything, but then I did this. This is the test I did. Okay, we'll select January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, and drum roll, 365, right? But the minute I hit select all, oh, it's 366. So hitting the select all button is not the same as actually selecting all the values, right? And that to me is a clear bug, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to select each of these items without having to do the pain in the ass of selecting each of these items, right? I just want a single button where I select all of them, except that doing this select all is not equivalent to doing this. And that to me is clearly a bug, right? Am I wrong? Am I crazy to think that? I mean, I'm willing to be for someone to tell me, yeah, Greg, that's not a bug, and here's why. I would love to hear the reason behind it. But in before you ask, right, it's also the same way does the button slicer, right? I do a select all. Button slicer has the bug. Text slicer, it doesn't really matter. It works entirely differently. List slicer, right? 366, select all, 366, right? So all the slicers have this bug in them. And I would need an explanation as to I was trying to think through the code and like why does this bug exist, right? Are they just is selecting all or not selecting all really the same state, right? And they're just filling these buttons in just for show, I guess you could say. I don't know, but it seems I think it's clearly a bug. But anyway, is it possible? Yes, as long as you can tell whether or not everything is selected or nothing is selected in a slicer, as long as you don't include the select all button. Okay, so you have to go to slicer settings. Don't use this because it's not the same as selecting each of these individually. So anyway, that is all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.